Welcome back. You're watching Newsmaker Live with me, Kendall Burton. Our guest this evening, Mary Isaac and Mr. Wilfred Pierre of the St. Lucia Civil Service Association. We were talking about the pensions before our break, and we were also talking about unemployment. The increase in unemployment, did it catch you by surprise, the latest figures released by the Statistics Department?
No, it did not, because from the time they implemented VAT, I know that a lot of people have been, a lot of businesses have been going under. I mean, you see it on your own purse. It's very, very heavy. When you, the groceries you would buy before for about $300 now is over $500 and something dollars. So your own budget, it has impacted negatively on your own budget. So I am not surprised when I hear that the unemployment figures, the unemployment rate has increased, because you hear it all the time. You see the businesses that are closing down, and you know the people who have lost their jobs. And the tourism sector cannot absorb anybody, any more people, you understand? So even hotels are not doing that great. It's only when they have peak season, jazz season and so on, you hear that the hotels are full and stuff like that. But outside of that, they're offering all kinds of staycations and everything, but even that is not sufficient to sustain them. So I am not surprised that the private sector is supposed to create employment, but they need the incentives to be able to do so. They need the breaks to be able to do so. We don't see that happening. So I do not know how we are going to bring that rate down.
But clearly, I mean, well, I mean, even before there was the increase, you had the statistical department that indicated that you have about 17,000 persons that are unemployed. So now it's worse, so it might be close to 20,000. But when you get situations like that, you have to begin, as we've been saying, to really create the economic activity that is required. Put the structure in place. I mean, when you look at the private sector should be the engine for growth in St. Lucia. But when you look at the structures that are available to create that in enabling environment, it's not there. You look at countries like Barbados, not Dominica, but the United States. How you think the private sector was able to increase economic growth? Is because the government made a deliberate attempt to create the structure, the Small Business Administration. We have SEDU, we have the OPSR, we have a whole set of little different structures that don't work together. And I think it's time that we come together and create a business development center. I have mentioned that to the minister, that is what we need to do to get we have to really look at creating institutions that work. We cannot have a OPSR in an office that invariably it doesn't open on the weekends. We have a Bell Fund, that is another place. We have a National Skills Center, that is one place. We have a SEDU in the Ministry of Commerce. Why can't we do like Jamaica and the United States and put these as one center, a business development center, and to provide the assistance for the private sector, the small businesses, so that they can grow and provide the financing window for these to happen. The other thing also is the innovativeness. We need to have a center for innovativeness that could take, I mean, sometimes what it does, it hurts me when you see these competitions that they have. They call it the tech, doing science and technology, and you see the creativity in these people, but that's where it stops. It never goes further than that. When the children leave the secondary school, there's nothing after that. But they need to have some innovativeness, some kind of science and technology, you know, so that we can create the kind of businesses and products that comes out of these things. We don't have that. Even research and development in the agricultural sector. When you go at the research department, you will be amazed to see what it is now. It is not the thing where you had Calix George and all these guys that were, these guys were scientists in their ways, right? And now you don't have that. We need to create these kind of structures for that to happen. And when you look at countries like Chile have all the structures for it to develop, you know. They have ProChile, which is the marketing entity. It's in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and all it does is to be able to market the products. Then you have what you call INDAP, which is the Research and Development Institute. Then you have what you call SAS. It's the one that deals with the qualityness, you know, so that they know when the product leaves, and standards, when they leave Chile and go to the United States, that it would not be rejected. They have all of these structures. That's why they're successful. But we sit down there with a little OPSR there, a little NRD there, and all of these structures are, you find people, we have to bring these things together. We have to create the institutional structure that can really be the engine for small business development and to help the private sector. If we do not do that, and we're hoping that these little structures that we have are going to do that for us, it will not work. One of the things that I like is how agriculture, the extension division works. And I think we need to bring that into small business, where you have I was an extension officer, and we used to go to the farmer and provide all assistance to the farmer. You have to have businesses, you have to have that in terms of a small business development approach. And we used to work all day, all night, working with the farmer, you know. But that is the kind of model you need to bring into to help the private sector and small business.
You've raised a number of issues that I want to talk a little bit more about, but we only have 90 minutes and a lot of issues to get around. But I want to get your reaction to the suggestion that the unions, trade unions, contribute to the unemployment problem, because by pushing for wages above market equilibrium, you're actually creating unemployment, because by overpricing the labor force, the demand for labor reduces. How do you respond to that?
I don't agree to that at all, because already public workers do not make the good salaries, the attractive salaries that you get in the private sector. And what you find is that, unlike people who work in the private sector, who occasionally get a break, they get an increase or they get a bonus or something like that, public servants do not get anything. They don't get any bonus. The only time they get something is when we negotiate and they get an increase in wages. Now, if you look at that, if you look at inflation, there's always inflation impacting on the public servant's wage, and the public servant gets nothing. Some people get certain incentives. You work in the hotels, you get certain things. You work out there, your boss, you know, gives you certain things. But even we used to get a diary. Even that has gone. You understand? You don't get any kind of bonus in the public service. All you get is your raw little salary. And if the union does not negotiate to increase that, even when economies are doing very, very, very well, government still fight with the union not to give you an increase. You've never heard a government say, okay, this year GDP went up so much, we had so much growth, we had inflation, therefore we recognize that your worth, it is through you that we are making, we've accomplished that amount of growth, let us give you something. No, the union comes and says, well, you've had growth of up to that percentage, inflation is up to our ears, can we get that for our members? And you are fought down tooth and nail. So I do not think that the unions cause the unemployment, create greater unemployment. I don't believe that.
And again, we only deal with grade 1 to 18, the 19s to the 21, the consultants. We don't, it's not at our whims and fancy that we have all the consultants that exist. Is the government is the one deciding that, look, we put consultants in. And that's another thing that we really have to look at. You know, and when the argument comes, as I indicated, where we're going to have discussion as to where to cut, we are not going to hear that you're going to leave all of these consultants that are there. You have employed, government have employed persons that are not in the public service. I know why they've done it. I mean, you have people under the NICE program. The government had no choice but to do that, because the private sector, there was not that kind of engineer, that kind of stimulation in the private sector. So government had to employ persons, or we'd have had chaos in St. Lucia. I can understand that. But when you begin to cut, you're not going to tell us that people that have been there for 20 years, you're going to cut these people and leave these persons that are just there for 2 years, that didn't go through the Public Service Commission. In fact, I put in too much out, because we have a plan. We have a plan, and we are going to execute our plan. We have fought this thing through. We have done our analysis. We have looked at what happened in Barbados and other countries, and we are well prepared to have discussions with the government with a view that when they begin to look at creating economic activity, you don't cut. You don't cut.
We also have a situation where they bring in a lot of people on contract in the public service. Now, there is no security of tenure when they do that. these people don't really, they're afraid to join the union because they sometimes feel they might be victimized and they will not renew their contract. We have young people coming into the service on 6-month contracts. Now, when a person get a contract, they're supposed to get a gratuity, but these people don't get a gratuity. And then you have so many right now being brought into the public service on contract. You also have people who have been on contract in the public service for years. And at the end of each contract, they get a big gratuity. So all that adds up, you understand? And there are a lot of areas, when you look at the public service, that of course, a lot of areas, a lot of activity that is going on in the public service that should not be going on in the public service. So when they're talking about the public service purse is very heavy, and we contribute the wages, and personal emoluments contribute the 40% of government expenditure. We know how that comes about. It's not supposed to be so.
This is a monster of their own creation.
That is right. You understand? So, but the public service is not responsible for increasing. The unions are not responsible for creating unemployment. The unions are more concerned about creating employment, as a matter of fact. This is why we are embracing the nice workers and the whole idea. But we are saying you have to do things that are sustainable. Because at the end of the day, like the pensions, it's going to come back to bite you. So when it comes back to bite you, don't point your fingers at the public service, because it is not the public service that created these problems.
And money is a funny thing, when you really look at it in terms of what motivates somebody, and it deals with all the Maslow theory. You cannot, if you have a situation where you have taken a person on a nice program for 6 months, the money that the person have used, they have bought goods and services. Their standard of living has increased in a certain way, you know, because you have endless of needs. But what prevents you is you have limited resources. So you get yourself in that situation, and then you have to somehow cut off. That causes a lot of problems for these individuals, you know. I'm not talking about that they have developed a new lifestyle like we think so, but they're able to do things that they would not have done, and they cannot maintain it, and it creates more stress for them because they have been there and they cannot understand, well, look, I cannot maintain these things, you know. They can provide, but you can't provide for your children on a short-term basis. You know, having children is a long-term commitment. Sending them to school is not for 1 year. You have to go for a whole period of time to have, and these people do have children. So it is a very sensitive thing. We take this thing of this unemployment thing very, very serious, because we understand the implication of especially in this environment where somebody is not working. And could there be a correlation of unemployment and the suicide rate that we have? Maybe that's a possibility. It could be a possibility. So we have to think quickly. And again, it's happening to men. So it tells you, it brings you into another dimension. So we quickly have to begin to do things that will create economic activity. I think we have been doing okay when you look at the economy, given the fact that we had leaf spot disease, we had troughs, we had all of these things. We had a world economic crisis. But yet still, when you look at over the 10 years or the last from 2009, we have not had, on an average, we have had growth, right? So if, let's say, for example, these things did not happen, you could have seen that we would have been on our way to recovery. But again, you cannot predict for these things. This year, we could have had one also. But again, as I indicated, there are funds that are there for that, but we're not tapping into the funds. The adaptation fund is there. There are 3 times within the year that they have called for proposal. The last one was in January. We have not submitted a proposal to that fund. And that fund provides funds to do climate change adaptation. We have to begin to be serious.
Let me remind the viewers that the lines are open. You can begin calling to ask questions or to contribute to the discussion. You're making a point.
I would say that the financial institutions also, I believe that their standards are too high, and they do not foster economic development at all. When you look at people, small business people who try to tap into funding from the banks ask for all kinds of things that these people can never have. And that just demotivates the people. I remember at one time...
But remember that the banks are operating in the same economic crisis as well. So you're not anxious to hand money out to people who are not viable.
Yes, but in order for you to make these people viable, they need the funds, they need the money. You have to put the funds out there so that these people can generate income, and you know the thing can pick up. If the banks say we're not taking any risk, the people want to work, but they do not have the financing to create employment for themselves, then you know we just stay where we are. We're not going anywhere, and then you find the crime rate increases, more people commit suicide, and you know it all spirals into.
So if you take people for granted, I mean the companies and things, so that's why trade unions are so important, because they would do the analysis and see what the situation is. We have, for example, look at Sagicor. We have had discussion with Sagicor, and Sagicor is saying that they cannot give us that level of increase that we want. But that same Sagicor bought a bank in Jamaica. RBTT Bank, they bought RBTT Bank in Jamaica. They have even divested some of the assets that they had with the UK. So where the money that they have, they bought a bank, you know, a bank they have bought. And they have divested some of the assets from the UK. And yet still, we're suffering and you know, the world crisis and things like that. So you have to be very careful how you're dealing with these. You must get the information.
Okay, we have our first call. Good evening, you're on the air. Hello? Okay, we seem to have lost that call. Let's talk about productivity in the in the public service. That's an issue that's been coming up a lot. How do you even measure productivity in the civil service?
Actually, it's strange you should say that. We have a formula, and it is available to anybody who wants it. It is not something that I can just say to you, A plus B equals C, but there is an economic formula that we have, and I believe we are going to send it to the people at the Ministry of Finance, because you see, we do not have to fight with each other when negotiation time comes. We have to sit as mature individuals, look at the state of the economy, but the information has to be forthcoming. When the union asks for information on whatever it is, statistics on whatever, the Ministry of Finance should make that information available, and they should make truthful information available so that we can sit and look at it, analyze it, assess it, and use that model to come up with what it is that is due, if anything, to public workers. Now, it shouldn't be a situation where when you calculate the model, when you calculate based on the model, and you see that 10% is due, you back down and say you're not going to use the model. We have to do this in good faith and give Jack his jacket. You understand? So we have to agree in the first instance, the model, is it appropriate? Is it going to work? And we all have to decide, yes, we are going to use this model. Because when there's no growth and there is no inflation, maybe there will not be any need for people to get an increase. But when there is growth and there is inflation, because I know these two elements are in there somewhere in that model, you have to expect that you will have to give the workers what is due to them. And I believe that this is why people are not talking about the models. They are not coming up with the models, but I believe they are aware that there are models, there are ways and means of measuring productivity. And these people are economists. They get paid big salaries. They ought to know that there are ways and means of measuring productivity. And I believe it is time we start to measure productivity in the workplace in St. Lucia. Because when you look at our estimate of expenditure, you see that every activity of government, you are getting expenditure is much, much higher than revenue. That is unacceptable, and it is unsustainable. So they have to stop talking and talking and talking about productivity, and start measuring that productivity. Because they may be surprised to find out that the very same people who are complaining about productivity are the ones that are causing the lack of productivity in the public service.
And that is the discussion that I thought the Productivity Council would have been. And you heard a pronouncement from the chairman that how government is paying people to pass an exam. I mean, that is the kind of level of discussion you have in there at the Productivity Council. When you listen to the ministers, I mean, if you had listened to the ministers, especially Philip Pierre, my cousin, mentioning about how his staff had been very productive, Wasco, Lucilec, that's when they talk about productivity, you know. That's when they actually come and say, well, workers have been productive. The Ministry of Agriculture also, they have been productive. But after that, you don't hear about them again. You just hear one talking about they see somebody cleaning their nails, and well, when they come to them, nobody's answering the phone and things like that. They conveniently get times when they talk about productivity. The little fireman, look at the kind of stress that the firemen are putting themselves in with the situation. The traffic officers are putting themselves in with all the situation that the policemen are facing now with all that situation. These people are very productive, but nobody talks about them. And these people are getting meager salaries. They're not in the grade 15 to the grade 18, but these are the persons that help to keep the security of St. Lucia, you know. But we don't hear about these things. And all you would hear is that persons in the public service are not productive, and how the private sector is more productive than the public sector, you know. And then you hear the nonsense that's being spoken in the Productivity Council. They need to do the analysis like what Mary is saying. Look at models that measure productivity, see whether for the inflation rate or economic growth, and you come up with a formula that can say, well, okay, you see, once we have looked at that formula, we have put that formula into operation, you cannot get an increase because of the fact that there's no economic growth. You know, also thing has reduced, inflation has reduced. So why are you looking for increases? You know, so it has something that you can measure, and we have that formula that have been tested and have been developed, and we're going to have that discussion with the Ministry of Finance when the time comes.
Now, you started talking about some of the issues that lead to this perception of lack of productivity in the public service. I want you to expand on that. What contributes to the perception that they're not as productive as they should be?
Well, the perception is there, but what I think people look at, people say to you that they occasionally they'll...
Have you ever called? Let's take that call and you can continue. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, good day.
Good evening.
Okay, I'm calling in terms of the discussion about productivity and giving Jack his jacket. If I believe if an employee is not productive and they're not doing what they're supposed to, they have to be pulled up, or if they have to go, they have to go. Not because they are employed with the public sector and government, that means they are untouchable. If you have a way of a rate or whatever module you say you are using, if it has to be revised in terms of that, because in 2014, if it's the government who has to revise it, or the union, whatever that has to happen, it should happen. But I believe everybody's been suffered in the country, and all of us is in the same economic problems that are going through.
But ma'am, when people talk about productivity, it's always a rank and file. The people from grade 1 to 6, and the people that are grade 19 and 20, 21, nobody talks about them in terms of they're not being productive.
No,
and
but
things
hear
like
this, I am not choosing what grade of employee. I'm speaking generally. You can be from grade 30 down to grade 0. I am not taking sides on which grade it is. If you are not producing, you are not producing.
So we are on the same page. We are saying that there are ways and means of measuring that, and instead of people to just talk, the people who are saying that people are not productive, or the employer, can use these models and show that the people are productive or the people are not productive. And like you're saying, if a person is not productive and you can prove the person is not productive, and you can find a way of figuring out why that person is not productive, then the employer must deal with it.
Exactly, and that is what I agree with. So if I heard clearly what the gentleman was saying about the fireman, and somebody saying about they're not doing, somebody not answering the phone or not doing their nails, or was doing their nails or something, I didn't hear clearly. If the fireman is working, the fireman is working. If he is due for an increase because he's working, let him have an increase.
That's right.
But you see, they don't recognize that.
If you come to a workplace and you there and they're not answering the phone, because there have been an instant where I keep calling and nobody's answering the phone, and I walked to the ministry and I stood there, I used my cell phone and I called, and A girl is standing there and she never picked up the phone, and I told her I am the one calling.
That's correct. But ma'am, even I had a discussion with a friend of mine when he was telling me, look at these policemen that stand up by the graveyard. All they do is just stand up there. These people are a waste of time, they're not productive. But the fact that they are there, you know, the fact that they are there, they are being very productive. It's just the nature of the job, you know.
Yes, and I understand that.
Right, right.
I understand that. I mean, I am not the one to look at the police officer standing there. He has a supervisor, and he has a PS, and he has a corporal, whatever it is. So we have people in place to look at employees. And even supervisors, when they are doing appraisals and everything, if they find the employee is not producing, then they need to write.
That's right.
I quite agree with you.
You understand?
I think we are on the same page, you know, on that. We are on the same page. The union is not saying if a person is not productive, you know, the person should be there and the person should be paid and so on and so forth. The union is saying measure it and show the person that the person is not, and figure out why is the person not productive and do something about it.
Okay, well, I don't have an issue with that, but what I believe is that if employees are not producing, we need to admit it, that employees are not producing.
Yeah,
and
we got that. I think
are,
you're saying 6 and they're saying half a dozen. Yeah, thanks for calling. Yeah. Let's talk about the minimum wage. The fact that there's no formal national minimum wage. What does the CSA stand on that issue?
Well, in this sort of climate right now, I do not know whether anybody would even bother to take a position on that. But from what we are hearing, there was a minimum wage commission set up to make recommendations, and even after those recommendations were made, and like all the consultancies and everything else, this is how things happen in St. Lucia. You pay people a lot of money to do something, and then after they've done it, they make recommendations, and it just falls on deaf ears.
Yeah, let's take another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Oh yes, good evening.
Hi, good night.
Very interesting discussion. I just wanted to make a comment on the question of productivity, which might surprise the country. There's been a tendency for a very long time for people to say that the civil service is not productive. But from my observations, I've been in the civil service, I've been in the private sector, there are serious people in the public service who are highly productive. There are others who are lazy and should go. Overall, the productivity, from my observations, and people in St. Lucia might find that very surprising, the productivity in the public service is higher than the private sector. Check that out, do your analysis, and prove me wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I agree with him.
Yeah, but I was going to ask him the basis for that, and maybe I can ask you since you agree with him.
But
how do you measure that?
Well, again, it's difficult to measure. Like again, I was telling a friend of mine that he used to tell me a certain politician was saying how persons are not productive. So I tell him, if somebody breaks into your home, who do you call? You call that politician? The first person you will call is a policeman. Now we begin to recognize how important a policeman is, you know? And, you know, that we tend to do these things. A traffic accident, who do you call? You call the police, right? And we know who to call, you know. We know who's going to be productive at that point in time, you know, but we make statements, oh, police ain't productive, teachers not productive, firemen not productive.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Good night.
I think it is not all about productivity, because when we out there, we do not know exactly what is happening in the various ministries in terms of the actual daily work. But when it comes to attitude towards work, it is very poor in the government sector. I can say about within a percentage basis, about 80% of those workers have a bad attitude towards work. I am not sure if they are not having enough training in terms of customer service, etc. But when it comes to aptitude and attitude, this is very lacking, and this has been there for a long time. I cannot believe Mr. Pierre, who's supposed to be one of the persons that's giving lecture, well, if he's still doing, I'm not sure, at the AFA, and the president of the union that is in the government service for so many years. To me, in hearing them talking, I'm getting the feeling like they're making excuses for the government workers, because we know it, we hear it, we see it, we have experienced it. I mean, it's really poor. And I'm not sure if it's because those workers know that their work are so confined that they behave in that manner. But then this is very poor attitude towards work, and something has to be done about that. Whether they come to work late, whether they don't answer the phones, whether they leave work before the time that they're supposed to leave, or if it's about 3:45, they would not do anything when you walk in because it's time to go at 4. It is bad overall, and something has to be done. Thank you.
Well, ma'am, it's your perception, because, I mean, we do have a number of persons that work beyond the call of duty, beyond the time. You mentioned people leaving at 4. There are people that stay and work after 4. Even to the extent you have people from grade 19 to 21 that actually take work home, you know. So when people begin to kind of stereotype workers and say, because you've seen one or two persons that you see very inefficient at the workplace, you draw a brush on everybody. It does not work that way. You have a number of persons that go on and beyond their duty to do the work that is required. And you see it during the time of disasters. You see them doing it. You see the policemen on the beat. These people have to leave their homes in situations in emergency. And nobody says anything, but then you would see one sitting down by the side of the road or just standing up in front by graveyard, and you think they're doing nothing because they're just standing up there. But by standing up there, they are being productive because that is their duty, right? So we cannot just come and say, because of a situation that we have, we call a ministry and the phone just ring out, or we came then we see somebody on the computer playing games, that you can take that and say everybody are like that. Or you see some persons leaving before 4 o'clock. That is not the case. You have persons in every sector that do this thing, right? But you cannot come and say that people in the public service, that is how they are, and talk about 80%. You know that.
But perhaps we need to make a distinction between customer service productivity and draw the line or the link between productivity and morale. Do you think poor morale is contributing to that situation?
Well, this is why I said they are models and they can measure these things. Because you might come to an office and see somebody sitting there and they're not answering the phone, but you do not know why. That person may have well been told, it is not your responsibility to answer that phone. You understand? That person may just be there waiting for something else. Maybe it is not the person's job or responsibility to answer the phone. The person who answers the phone is not there at the time. It's true the person can answer the phone, but maybe it is not the person's job to answer the phone.
Well, even the environment they work is not conducive for them to work either.
We have another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good night.
Yes, I wanted your panel to accept the fact that we do have some very unproductive civil servants, and those
I don't think you're denying that.
Whose customer service is atrocious, and the onus is not so much on them, because they, as a union, that's not necessarily their role. Their role is to protect the rights of their workers. Their role is to ensure that their workers get an honest pay and their working conditions are in order. It's not the role of the union to ensure that workers are productive. However, they can contribute towards that in terms of when they have their meetings and their conventions and what have you, to stress to the workers the need for them to be productive so that they will set the right example, so that when they go out there to bargain on their behalf, the employer will not say that, look, your workers are not this and that, So it helps the cause of the union leaders if the workers are productive.
Right.
But we have to accept that that some civil servants are very unproductive, and the government, the employer has to put measures in place to address these issues. They need to have a proper system of supervisorship, a proper system of accountability. That works from the top right down. At different levels of people reporting to people and so on, and also the need to have proper measures for productivity. I mean, there are formula for that.
But you cannot
for various types of work.
But you cannot divorce the environment in which some of our members work. We have a lot of issues, and we have had times where we had to call our members out because of the health situation.
I'm not talking about these. I mean, there are
no, but that is part of productivity too.
I'm not talking about cases where you might have a condition that might not be working. I'm talking about a situation where things are in order and workers are unproductive. Let's accept that.
We accept that.
There are occasional cases, and we are not denying that.
We accept that.
I don't think we should come and say about where air conditioners are down. It happens in all organizations.
No, but we took the lady to task, which said 80%. I mean, that was not accepted.
I mean, that's an arbitrary figure.
Right.
But we have to accept that it is there and so on. And the thing about it is that the reason why it's a problem is because the frontline people, the people that the public interacts with,
that is
these are the people that that need to have the proper customer service, and these are ambassadors for the union and for the service. These people had a proper approach to dealing with customers and so on, and the customer felt that particular person cared. Other things might be happening and they're not aware of it, and it's not an issue for them. You understand? So the frontline staff is very important that these people, are properly trained and they have the right aptitude, so that they can interact or deal with the public in the right way. But that's not the reason why I call actually.
That's correct. You're so right. You're so right.
The reason why I called actually was to ask you guys. I mean, given the state of the economy and the fact that it's happening around. I mean, Barbados, I started with Barbados and so on. What do you guys think needs to be done to turn the economy around so that the question of laying off staff becomes a non-issue? And if they have to lay off staff, the whole question of the step people and other persons who are paid by the public purse but who are not civil servants and whose jobs, a big question mark by the jobs of some of these people in terms of what they're doing. Because I walked. I drive down the coast and I see sometimes 200 people doing the work that maybe 5 people can do, and I wonder about it. So I really want to know from you all what suggestions, recommendations you have to address the issues so that the actual current civil servant will not be touched in terms of laying off. Thank you.
Thanks for your call.
Well, we did mention that.
I think that we are not innovative enough, like Mr. Pierre is saying, because there are a lot of ways and means that we can create employment in the private sector so that the private sector can absorb a lot of the people that they are planting in the public service. And that way we are going to leave the work of the public service for the public servants to do. When you take away work from the public servants and you give to consultants, that in itself is demotivating, it is demoralizing. And these are some of the issues we should look at. The caller asked, how should the country, the people create? Government have to assist in creating employment. The banks, the financial institutions have to loosen up and loan people the money so that the people could go into their own business. And I say that because I know if you look at in the poultry industry, for instance, we are importing, our import bill is millions of dollars. We are only producing about 35 to 40%, if at all, of the amount of chicken that we consume. We can employ about 100 farmers, put them down on the ground to produce chicken, about 3,000 birds per 6-week cycle. And all we need to do that is about $3 million. And we will be employing 100 people who in turn can employ another 200-300 people. That is a very low-skilled activity. You do not need any training at all to go into that sort of thing, except the owner of the thing needs to be trained a little.
And the extension division helps.
And you have the Ministry of Agriculture extension officers who will hold your hands and walk you through the thing. You understand? But we need the banks to finance those types of businesses.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good
I'm
evening.
just calling to say that we St. Lucians already know what we want. Because here they're calling out to criticize the public sector workers. What if tomorrow a decision is picked upon to say, well, we are going to lay off 150 staff? Then everybody would be up in arms. We could never find productivity nowhere we go. You go to SNS, where say the system is down because everything is modern technology. The store cannot open at 8 o'clock. Everybody would be up in arms. They would go to KFC. They would order a piece of chicken. They don't get what they want. They would be up in arms. So we St. Lucians don't know what we want. What they have to do, I agree with them saying customer service training and everything like that. They would go to Digicel. They have a double top-up or something. 100 people there waiting. Since they cannot get a top-up in 2 seconds, then they'll be up in arms, close down Digicel, everything. So we don't know what we want. St. Lucians have to
Always
learn
up in arms.
to do what is right and take their time. And if they take their time, then things would work out better for us. But we're too up in arms. St. Lucians have to learn to be careful. They don't know what they want. At the end of the day, it's just that they want what they want, and then that's it. Some things cannot go their way, then they would have all problems with things. There is no business that could do anything good for them, because the minute they have to wait, that's their problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your call.
So I was saying that we
poultry.
have a lot of low-skilled activity, low-skilled businesses that we can go into. We have production of pork. Okay, that's another one. Fishermen, that's another area that they could increase the number of fishermen, because you see now fish is selling. Everybody is saying, you know, healthy lifestyles and so on and so forth. Farmers who produce root crops and things like that. You need to make the land available to the people, so more people will go into sustainable agriculture, produce, at least they will be able to sustain themselves, if nothing else. So these are a lot of the areas that not everybody will be able to go into tourism. The hotel, the hospitality sector is not meant for certain people. We have to be careful who the people are, what types of people go into the hospitality sector. A lot of the farmers who were displaced need something to do. They need to be able to continue with their farms, with their farming, and they do not have those types of opportunities because the bank doesn't want to loan them money. They are not employed. You have to look at a formula when you giving a person a loan, and then they will tell you your debt to credit ratio and all those kinds of things. So we really have to look at the financial institutions loosening up on the standards that they have in place, because what they do is they generate a lot of money, they get a lot of money, and they just want to keep it all to themselves. And it's not going to work that way.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening, Mr. Pierre, Mr. Isaac.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just 2 points I need to make. The whole objective of this program, I wish you all would just reiterate it. Reason for that, we have quite a number of talk shows where you find much of the valuable points, the aching areas come up week after week, and nothing is done about it. Nothing. All we hear, it is aired, people get irate, people air their views. There's no body of persons or person that will take these issues, bring it to the right agency, bring it to the right person, and let's see if we can address it and come back and respond and say, okay, such and such was brought up at our last talk show. We have done such and such, and this is where we at. It's an issue where we have in St. Lucia. We just bring it to the fore and leave it there. I think if this show has to continue, and I say hats off to you all, kudos, good, very good initiative. Do it at least once a quarter. But when we get the issues, don't just let it go down to just dead air. Do something about it. The second thing about productivity in the public service, one of the callers I recall said, it's not all about productivity. I just wish, whilst all of us are entitled to our opinions, respected, well, but in this day and age, where we have to do so much more with the less, we have no resources. You cannot say to me, a public officer is coming into office and productivity is not the bottom line. I think at the end of the day, if we are not productive, there are hundreds of persons at the door ready to come in, ready to do it better than you, ready to do it faster than you, and to make a much greater contribution than you. When one caller said, we must do something about our public service, we must. I also agree with the caller who said the level of productivity in the public sector indeed is higher than the private sector. Difficult to measure, but if one actually undertakes an analysis and good measurement of what is happening in the private sector to that of the public sector, you cannot compare. Okay? The thing of, I'm going back to productivity, I think we are going around the circle and not pinning it down. At the end of the day, if you have any agency that is doing well, it points straight to top management. Who is the CEO? Who is the president? Who is the permanent secretary? Who are the top management personnel there? Similarly, for a company, agency, a ministry that is doing poor, people, it points to management. It points to supervisors, the quality of management that we get today, and not just in the public sector. We have a quality of people who are in top management today that are afraid to make key decisions and decisions that will impact the bottom line. Value for money, productivity, quality of service. Let us not go around it. We need to be mindful as a nation who it is we put at the top to lead and to manage. Thank you.
But the other thing we have...
Very good points, very good points, especially the last one.
Yeah. One of the things we really have to look at, St. Lucia, when you really look at it, we're very fortunate, you know. Every time, and I used to work in the Ministry of Agriculture, and I was there when they had Debbie and all of the Lily and all of them. Every time there is a tropical storm or hurricane, you find public servants put themselves out, and within a couple of days, they have able to be able to bring things back. And you heard the ministers talk about, you know, how WASCO do select Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Infrastructure, what the work and the quality of work that they do. And it stays, after that you don't hear nothing about it again, you know. We have people that are very, very productive. There are others that are slacking around also. They do have that, and in fact, that is how this world is. But what we are doing now, we are having situations where we are indicating to our members that, you know, productivity is important for you. You have to maintain your job. In that kind of environment that you have there, it is job protection. It is trying to maintain your job. And for you to maintain your job, you have to be productive on your work.
Yeah, we have another call. Before we take it, I want you to answer the first question that she raised about the follow-up and how you propose to bring some of those suggestions that you presented tonight to those people who really need to hear them and act on them. We'll take that call. Good evening. Hello, you're on the air.
How are you? Yes. Mr. Pierre.
Yes.
You seem to be wanting to defend a lot of issues that the callers are making in terms of the attitudes of workers in the workplace in this country. And we cannot just carry on like that. The last caller made a lot of valued points. And without taking up much of your time, what I would like to do with any one of you to come and walk with me in Castries and go to different department stores, go to different government offices, and you will see the attitude of the people. Disguise yourself or don't disguise yourself, and you will see firsthand. And that percentage the young lady made, 80%, I think it's higher than that. And we have a problem in this country, and if we don't address it and address it yesterday, it's going to escalate into something that is uncontrollable.
I can also take you to a walk also. I can also take you to a walk also in terms of our ambulance services, you know, where and to take you with them, let you see the kind of work that they do, and the fire service, to see the kind of work that the fire service do, the kind of work that the teachers also do. You know, that's the work you need to actually take, to see the challenges that these teachers face in the classrooms, how they have to be assisting the children, providing food for them and stuff like that, you know. And it is, I cannot understand how persons will be able to to stomach that kind of thing and to be able to be productive on the workplace. They're going on and beyond the call of duty to really be productive on the workplace.
We're talking about some of the solutions. I have a suggestion here. I want to get your reaction to it. It says the government should provide employment subsidies and that companies could be given tax breaks or subsidies for taking on long-term unemployed individuals. It would help give them new confidence and on-the-job training.
Well, I agree to that. The only problem, though, is when government gives subsidies or incentives and so on, it is not always passed on to the people that's supposed to receive it. Let's take a look at the stimulus package, for instance.
Yeah, but in this case, you can't do that, really, can you? Because the subsidy is based on your ability to keep staff or to employ new staff.
It depends who is monitoring. If you are able to monitor it, yes. But in some cases, there's no monitoring mechanism put in place, so it just gets, you know, diluted or swept under the wrong. It ends up in the wrong people's hands. And I think I heard the president or chairperson of the Productivity Council talking about the stimulus package, where he's saying the people who were supposed to benefit didn't benefit. First of all, as soon as people, you know, heard about the stimulus package, the suppliers started increasing their prices. You understand? So the benefit that was supposed to be passed on to the people buying those goods, those items, the people didn't realize the benefit of the package because the things were not price controlled. So the suppliers could just increase their price. You understand? So who got that benefit? The people still, the end users still did not benefit as much as they should have from the stimulus package. But if the thing was allowed to work the way it was supposed to work, then the end users would have benefited. So government cannot just go and give incentives, give, you know, things like that, unless they will be able to put things in place to monitor. And then you are looking at increasing the public service to be able to monitor those kinds of packages, stimulus packages and so on. So I do not think that is, in a way, it could work, only if it can be monitored and enforced. You understand? Yeah.
But these are the things that we really have to look at, thinking outside of the box, looking for innovative ways, coming together. We cannot do this thing by you have the Labour Party and the UWP in that kind of tug of war and things like that. We have to work together. We have to begin. The problems and the challenges that are facing us are so difficult. And the only way we can deal with this problem is for us to work together, recognize that this is a St. Lucia that we have. We have our children that have to live there. We have to begin to work as private sector, as public sector, as government, and religious also. I mean, even in Barbados, they were even saying, some of the clergy were saying that they felt that they did not do enough to help the situation in Barbados. And likewise in St. Lucia. One of the biggest landowners in St. Lucia, especially in the northern part of the island, is the Roman Catholic Church. They own quite a bit of land in the north part of the island. And these lands that I have been there, the lands just sit there. Nobody's using it. There's no productivity when it comes to these lands. Could that not be something that we could have used to build houses for persons, helping in creating economic activity? We have to begin to mobilize the resources that are there, that are just tied there. Nothing is happening with these resources. And then we talk about productivity in the country. We are the very same people that cry about productivity, but yet still we're not using the resources that God has given us to, you know, for us to be better in terms of creating economic activity and economic growth.
Okay, we have to wrap up, but a good way to do that is to follow up on that last caller's question or challenge. What do you do now from here henceforth?
Well, she's saying that people don't follow up, and it is not very easy in St. Lucia to follow up. Even when you try, sometimes people tend not to see the good in what you're trying to do, because again, our head is stuck in the politics or in the religion. Or so I mentioned to a fellow worker that in St. Lucia we practice a lot of apartheid, political apartheid. But we talk about Nelson Mandela and he died, and we say, and we talk about discrimination and, you know, South Africa and white countries where, you know, they discriminate against us when we go there. But in our own country there is a lot of that. At CSA, what we are trying to do, we are trying to get the multipurpose cooperative going. But what you find is sometimes people will come and just talk it down. You understand? Because it is not their idea. You know, so instead of rallying behind it, they try to tear it down. And as a result, It may or may not take off the ground. We're also looking at self-insurance, because what you find is that in St. Lucia, we do not have any insurance, real St. Lucian insurance company that provides medical insurance and all that sort of stuff. You have, most of them are foreign. Clico, you see what happened to Clico. We had to move to Sagico. We've moved to Sagico and the premiums keep going up, right? So now we are saying, let us look at self-insurance. We have a core group of people in the St. Lucian, in the public service. These people are the ones who are employed to provide all kinds of technical assistance, all kinds of services to the public. We are saying, let us bring those members. A lot of our members have retired. They want to still be in the workforce. They're still capable of being in the workforce because they retire as early as 55. So we are saying we can go into our own self-insurance, we can manage our own self-insurance, and if need be, other unions can come on board. The money will stay right here in St. Lucia, in our own pockets, help our own people, and we will be running our own thing. It will create employment for some of our own people. But you know what? There are some people who are trying to pull that down. And that is what happens when you try to follow up on issues. We're seeing it even in Parliament. What do we see there? We just fight, fight, fight. This is a house where you're supposed to be looking at policies. You're supposed to be taking decisions that have to do with legislation, regulations, strategizing so that the country can go forward, so that we can have some kind of economic activity. This is the brain. This is where everything is supposed to take place in the country in terms of government policy, legislation, and so on and so forth. But what is happening? What do you see them spending most of their time on? They're supposed to be listening to these things that we are saying and following up on those things. Taking up some of these that pertain to them. The union will take what pertains to the union, and the members of the union are supposed to support the initiatives that the union is putting forward.
Well, let's hope that doesn't deter you from pressing forward and presenting those suggestions. Anyway, I want to thank you both for being with us this evening. Ms. Mary Isaac, Mr. Wilfred Pierre, from the St. Lucia Civil Service Association. Those of you who called, thanks for calling and thanks for watching. Join us next week for another Newsmaker Live. We'll see you then.